Hi, I'm Anne Pollard, and this is the reading of my book, Cleo's Fabulous Adventures, The Realm of the Woods. This is Chapter 1, Cleo. Cleo loved to walk in the woods. It was always a great way to connect to nature and calm her down, especially if she was having a bad day, and it seemed lately she was having a lot of them. She was thinking about her day as she got ready for work. She stood in front of the mirror and saw the face that she sees every morning. Her skin was a golden bronze and her eyes were a deep shade of brown. She combed her long hair straight and black and mussed with her bangs to cover that scar on her forehead. It was a childhood injury that left its mark from her hairline down her forehead almost to her eyebrow. She hated that scar, was always embarrassed about it. She knew other people would stare and think how ugly she was. But she pushed that feeling aside, wrapped her coffee, and started getting ready to head to the office. She had a lot to get done, but she felt like she mostly had it all under control. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something major was going to happen today. It was her birthday, but that usually didn't mean much. She wasn't the type of person that went out and celebrated things like that. She would just spend a quiet evening at home after work. She gathered her usual stuff and jumped in her car. It was only a short ride to the office. She started the car and pulled out of the driveway. As she turned into the street, a crow flew by, cawing loudly, and almost hit her car. Wow, she thought, that was weird. But she continued down the street. As she was getting ready to turn out of her neighborhood, she hesitated for just an instant. She got a flash of something and slammed on the brakes, just in time to miss being broadsided by some crazy driver who just ran the red light going 60 miles an hour. Cleo's heart was racing and she stopped breathing for a minute. Even though she wasn't hurt, the whole thing caused her to freeze, her hands clutched tightly on the steering wheel. She stayed like that for a few minutes to catch her breath and come back to reality. As she sat in her car, her feelings shifted from fear to sheer anger. She could feel it starting in her gut and pretty soon had taken over her body and her mind. She started shaking, she was so mad. So she just sat in her car, feeling all the emotions that were rushing through her body. After about 10 minutes, she pushed all of those feelings aside and headed to the office. When she arrived, the parking lot was full. Since she was late, she ended up parking in the alternate lot and walked the rest of the way to the office. "Oh, this is going to be one of those days," she said to herself. "I can already feel it going downhill." At least it was summer, so the weather was good and the sun was out. As she entered the building, she took the elevator up to the 4th floor to her office. Cleo was an office manager in a small but upcoming company. She had lots of various responsibilities depending on the day and had a staff of 12 people helping her. At least most days they helped. As she got off the elevator, one of her staff members, Jonathan, ran over to her before she could even get into the office. "Cleo, where have you been? We've been looking for you." Cleo was a little surprised because she was really only about 15 minutes late. She explained she got delayed with traffic and asked what was so urgent anyway. Jonathan said that the company owner was in the office today and was looking for her. She wanted to set up a small meeting with the office staff to review some upcoming changes. Oh boy, that's never a good sign. Cleo and Jonathan walked in and found the owner waiting for her in her office. Jonathan eased away so he wouldn't have to deal with what might be coming, and Cleo went into her office and closed the door. The owner, Samantha, was a great leader and boss, and she and Cleo got along really well. Samantha told Cleo that her small company was going to be bought out soon, and things would be changing. At this point, everything would stay business as usual, but they would be moving office spaces and that needed to happen sooner rather than later. Cleo took a breath and sighed. Thoughts started running through her head about whether she would have a job after the buyout was complete. Then she started thinking and calculating everything that would have to be done for an office move. The more she started creating that list in her head, the more she began to get anxious and stressed. Samantha was a good boss, but she rarely dealt with the day-to-day stuff, and Cleo knew that would all fall to her. "So are we talking like 90 days? Cleo asked Samantha. "Well, more like 45. This has all happened so fast, and if I didn't act on it right away, they may have pulled the deal completely." They chatted about the buyout for a few more minutes, and Cleo kept her composure like she always did. Then Samantha asked Cleo to set up an office meeting for everyone in the afternoon so she could announce the good news. Cleo said she would, and suggested they plan for 3 p.m. After Samantha left, Cleo sat down, drew in another deep breath, and sighed. Yep, this is going to be one bad day. Jonathan saw she was alone and rushed to her office. "What did Samantha say?" he asked quickly and with some trepidation in his voice. Cleo said, "Can't really say now, Jonathan, but it's okay. We're going to have a meeting this afternoon and talk about some changes." "Oh no," said Jonathan, "it's bad news, isn't it?" Cleo smiled the warmest smile she could muster and told Jonathan that everything was fine. They would talk about it later. Jonathan did not return the smile, but headed back to his desk. Cleo was the office support person and counselor. When someone had a problem or needed to vent about something, Cleo was always the one they went to. She knew that it was good for them to have someone who would just listen, but sometimes it was really draining for her. But she never turned anyone away, and that usually translated into some long days. She worked through the morning, starting to get the plans set for the meeting in the afternoon, as well as the 10,000 other things she had on her plate. She was still shaken from the traffic near-death experience, and she just couldn't seem to get her concentration going in the right direction. About 10:45, she decided she needed a mental break. She thought, "I'll go for a quick walk in the park." She did this quite often, and it always helped her get centered again. The park was only a 10-minute walk, so she decided to take an early lunch and head out. She tapped Jonathan on the shoulder on the way out, said she was taking an early lunch and would be back by noon. If anyone needed her, they could reach her on her cell. He nodded as she headed out the door. She took the 10-minute walk to the park, where there was a wonderful wooded section that was filled with great trails. She had done a particular trail so many times she knew exactly what to expect, and she knew she wouldn't get too messy before going back to work. But she knew she had to watch her time so she wouldn't be late getting back. Then she could plan the afternoon meeting while everyone was at lunch. Cleo got to the trail entrance and started down the path. She knew this trail so well, she didn't really even need to pay attention to where she was going. As she started down the path, her mind wandered back to the morning and everything that had happened. The woods were quiet. Since it was before lunch, there was no one out, since most people came to the park for their lunch break. She was pleased that she had the trail to herself. As she walked, she listened to the birds in the trees and the gurgle of the stream just off to the right. She was relaxing a little more, even though her mind was still racing with so many thoughts. It was usual for her to have an active mind, and that was normal, although not really peaceful. She thought to herself, "I wish there was someone who could really help me gather my thoughts and bring me a little peace." Then she heard a strange noise to her right. It was a sound that she didn't recognize at all, and she was startled. As she turned to see what the sound was, she got her cell phone out of her back pocket just in case. She glanced down at her phone as she pulled it out of her pocket and noticed that the time was 11:11. Thanks for joining me. Join me again for the next episode of Cleo's Fabulous Adventures. Have a fabulous